Imagine making $1 billion in just one day by collapsing the economy of an entire nation. That's exactly what George Soros did in 1992. He's one of the most divisive figures in history. He's praised for his philanthropy, but then again, he's also vilified for his ruthless financial moves. So how did this financial mastermind become both a hero and a villain?
Soros became a billionaire by shorting the British pound, crushing the Bank of England in the process.
Soros has devoted money to causes such as ending the war on drugs, to promoting human rights and democracy abroad.
Soros has long used money to promote his political views.
We need to uncover the truth about his controversial legacy. This is the story of George Soros, the man who broke the Bank of England and changed the world. By the way, 98% of you watching this video are not subscribed to the channel, so consider subscribing for regular deep dive documentaries on historical financial figures. Alright, let's start with George Soros' beginnings. George Soros was actually born George Schwartz in 1930 to middle-class Jewish parents in Budapest in Hungary. His father changed his family name to Soros in 1936 as a response to the growing anti-Semitic climate at the time. Soros' childhood in Hungary was mostly peaceful, but that was until the conflict arrived on their borders. When the Nazi forces occupied Hungary in 1944, life became a constant struggle for survival. The occupation led to the brutal massacre of over 500,000 Hungarian Jews. Soros' family survived by securing false identity papers. They managed to keep their Jewish identities concealed to escape Nazi detection. George Soros would actually go on to say that not only did we survive, but we managed to help others. Now, this statement had a lot of controversy around it because George Soros' actions were in question. There were some who accused him of collaborating with the Nazis, betraying his own people. But there's very little evidence for this, actually. The reality is that George Soros was working as a courier for the Jewish Council. This was an organization under Nazi oversight tasked with enforcing German directives on the Jewish population. But it didn't really involve turning in Jewish people for arrest. So decades later, Soros would actually reflect on this experience, saying that he didn't feel any shame or remorse about this. He argued that he simply did what he had to do to survive. After World War II, Hungary fell under communist control. However, the Soros family managed to escape in 1947 to London. Once in London, George took on various odd jobs to support himself while studying at the London School of Economics. That's where he studied philosophy under the renowned Karl Popper. The professor's ideals about an open society would later forever shape Soros' worldview. But as much as he was interested in theoretical debates, he decided to abandon his aspirations to become a philosopher and instead dove headfirst into the world of finance. He joined the London merchant bank Singer and Friedlander in 1954, where he got his start in investments. Just 2 years later, he moved to New York City. He initially worked as an analyst, and then he gained a reputation for his sharp insights and his strategic acumen. Over the next decade, he continued to climb up the corporate ladder. Career-wise, he was considered quite successful for his age, but that wasn't enough for the young and ambitious Soros. In 1967, George Soros became a hedge fund manager while working for the First Eagle Funds. The experience of managing investments for some of the country's wealthiest individuals eventually inspired Soros to start managing his own hedge fund. In 1973, he established the Soros Fund. This would later be known as the Quantum Endowment Fund. He applied his bold investment strategies to lead the fund towards rapid growth. His sharp instincts in the market allowed him to foresee significant events like the 1987 stock market crash. But not all of his predictions hit the mark. So yeah, he had somewhat of a successful career so far, but nothing to write history books about. But that all changed in 1992. George Soros is now 62 years old. He's about to make his first $1 billion, and that too in a single day. You see, at the time, England was part of the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, or ERM, and this was a fixed exchange rate system linking several European currencies. Now, England was facing mounting pressure to devalue its currency or exit the ERM. And that's when the British government finally floated their pound, which meant that they allowed the British pound to change constantly based on its supply and demand. But the result was terrible. The value plummeted. And that's where George Soros saw an opportunity. He was ready with an eagle eye, poised to take advantage of the situation. You see, Soros had leveraged $10 billion in a short position on the pound. Shorting an asset basically means that you're investing in a way where the investor will profit if the market value of the asset falls. So essentially, he was betting against the pound, against his own country. It was a risky bet, but it sure yielded one of the most profitable trades in financial history to date. Now, this all happened in September 16th in 1992, and that became known as Black Wednesday, and it earned him the title of the man who broke the Bank of England. This single move catapulted Soros to international fame and immense wealth, but it also made him a very despised character. I mean, sure, some saw him as a visionary investor, but others criticized him as a ruthless speculator taking advantage of a vulnerable economy, a move that ended up hurting millions of people. There were also rumors circulating about a political agenda because Soros was quite a vocal advocate of European integration. I mean, Soros had been a vocal opponent of Britain's hesitance towards joining the euro, which is why many conspiracy theorists saw it as a deliberate plot. By now, his name was legendary in the financial industry, but he certainly wasn't on a winning streak. In fact, he was on his way to experiencing a number of very heavy setbacks. In 1994, he thought that the US dollar would strengthen against the Japanese yen, but instead, markets saw the dollar drop throughout the year. This misstep led the quantum fund to reportedly lose hundreds of millions of dollars in a single day that February. He was determined to correct the course and once again establish himself as the dominant force in finance. But then again, in 1997, he made an even more controversial bet. Although he denied his direct involvement in the matter, Soros acknowledged that his fund had taken a short position on the Thai baht earlier that year. That basically sent signals that the baht might be overvalued, and in turn, this move helped ignite speculative pressures that significantly drained Thailand's foreign exchange services. Within months, Thailand's economy began to unravel, marking the start of the Asian financial crisis that soon engulfed most of East Asia. Eventually, this also came to impact Latin America and Eastern European economies in 1998. As the crisis deepened, leaders across the region pointed fingers at Soros. In fact, Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir bin Mohamad actually openly accused Soros of contributing to the collapse of the Malaysian ringgit. As the financial chaos intensified, even Soros's fund could not withstand the shock. By the end, his fund suffered massive losses and billions were wiped out by the crisis. In the wake of these turbulent years, Soros shifted his approach. He rebounded briefly with gains in internet stocks in 1999. However, when the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, he became even more conservative, opting for a very cautious investment strategy. Now, it might seem like I'm saying that George Soros was a one-hit wonder with his one big win against the British pound, but make no mistake, he was still a very savvy investor overall. I highlighted instances where he was wrong, but over his very long career, he made a number of successful bets that would slowly accumulate his wealth, making him one of the most successful investors of his time. Anyway, the new millennium also marked a turning point in Soros as an individual, with him devoting more time to his other endeavor, philanthropy. With his rising wealth, Soros had been delving into the world of philanthropy. In 1984, he channeled his resources into founding the Open Society Foundations. This is a global network of philanthropic initiatives. Now, initially, the organization set its focus on Hungary, Soros's birthplace. Soros awarded scholarships, offered technical support, and aided in modernizing schools and businesses. What's interesting is that even though Hungary was a communist state at that time, Soros somehow managed to secure assurances that his foundation could operate freely from government intervention. When the Cold War ended and the Soviet influence waned, Soros expanded his efforts across Eastern Europe as well. Foundations were established in places like Czechoslovakia, Poland, Russia, and Yugoslavia. He then broadened his focus into other regions as well, funding his projects in the United States, Africa, Latin America, and Asia. The scope of his philanthropy was vast, targeting issues from education to democratic governance and transparency. Unlike many philanthropists, Soros's charity was somewhat distinct and controversial because it aimed at the spread of a distinct ideology, beyond just financial help, because it was not just simple charity, but rather a real attempt at shaping societal changes. His philanthropy centered around the idea of an open society. You'll remember from earlier in this video, the concept was deeply influenced by Karl Popper's philosophy. He was influenced by this during his time in the London School of Economics, but in simple terms, that philosophy emphasizes a society that fosters rational exchange and resists authoritarian control. And for Soros, the open society framework meant encouraging global cooperation based on shared values of freedom, equality, and prosperity. In other words, Soros tried to transform both national and international policies and institutions. His foundations advocate for a world where boundaries blur in the favor of a united, globally conscious community, and his efforts left a lasting imprint on global society. There's no denying this. Now, perhaps most notably, his work may have contributed to the fall of the Soviet bloc. In his 1990 book, Opening the Soviet System, Soros reflected on his foundation's role in Hungary. He said that it helped to, and I quote, demolish the monopoly of dogma by providing alternate funding sources for cultural and social initiatives. This strategy ultimately helped to weaken the communist control, but from within. Meanwhile, in the West proper, Soros championed initiatives that reshaped the landscape of civil liberties and personal freedoms as well. In the early 2000s, he funded movements supporting medical marijuana. Later on, the same movements also supported the same-sex marriage acts. These moves would contribute to the momentum of progressive politics in many Western countries. Soros also aimed to cultivate a new class of global leaders through education. To this end, he founded the Central European Society, or the CEU, to foster a generation of transnational European elites. Students here were trained to embody the values of an open society. By doing so, Soros envisioned the CEU as a beacon for progressive European ideals and a base for future leaders committed to democratic values. So fast forward to 2017, Soros actually made his single biggest contribution to his charities by transferring $18 billion of his personal fortune to his foundations. This boosted his contributions to over $32 billion in total. This massive endowment was meant to ensure the foundation's ability to continue promoting open societies worldwide for decades to come. By doing so, Soros is aiming to ensure his influence on global politics and social reform will endure long after his departure. I mean, he used indirect means to influence change for sure, as you can see, but at the start of the new millennia, he also began to adopt more direct means. The George W. Bush administration's response to September 11th attacks was a turning point for George Soros as well. It compelled him to pivot from economic influence to direct political intervention. You see, apparently Soros was disturbed by Bush's aggressive rhetoric, especially when he said this:
"Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists."
Soros saw this as reminiscent of authoritarian ideologies he had fought so hard against in Europe. Soros also feared that this approach would lead the United States into a permanent state of war, and it would result in a vicious cycle of relentless foreign interventions and increasing domestic oppression. And with America being the world's most dominant player, he considered such developments a threat to global peace and the ideals of an open society, something that he was a big proponent of. But here's the thing, Soros was convinced that Americans did not share Bush's extremist ideologies, so a recovery was still possible. That's why Soros threw his support behind John Kerry in 2004 in the presidential elections. He hoped that Kerry's victory would halt America's descent into further authoritarianism. But Bush won instead. Soros now faced a crisis of confidence in the political judgment of the American people. He feared that they might endorse policies incompatible with the open society that he envisioned. Reportedly, this defeat convinced him that to protect democratic ideals, he had to fully shed away his neutrality. That's why Soros intensified his focus on political support, aiming to shift the nation towards leaders that aligned with his values. That's why he directly began to give massive support to candidates who he believed were more in line with his vision of an open society. In the years that followed, George Soros became a key financial supporter for Democratic candidates. He played a significant role in funding the campaigns of Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. He also supported Hillary Clinton in 2016 and contributed to Joe Biden's successful bid in 2020. Now, some may defend his actions as a commitment to progressive values. However, others see it as a little more than political maneuvering for personal gain. So with all that being said, who is the real George Soros? I mean, his influence remains polarizing, gathering harsh criticism from both the political left and the right. Left-wing critics often see Soros as a powerful oligarch who perpetuates inequality through unchecked wealth accumulation. They argue that his status as a billionaire automatically aligns him with capitalist systems that prioritize profit over public welfare. They suggest that his influence perpetuates the very financial inequalities that he aims to oppose. Despite his efforts for progressive causes, many people are right about something, and that is that his wealth was built within and benefits from the same corrupt system that harms the lives of so many ordinary people. Now, on the other hand, critics on the right say that he's promoting a, quote, a globalist agenda. By this, they mean that he is working to undermine national sovereignty, and that he's corroding Western cultural identity, whatever the heck that means. His support for liberal immigration policies and refugee assistance programs also fueled conspiracy theories that he aims to dilute national borders. These critics see him as undermining traditional values by funding initiatives that promote multiculturalism and postmodernist thoughts, all to weaken the glue that holds a nation together. So yeah, lots of polarizing views about him from both sides of the aisle. However, Soros himself voiced the opposition to both. He argues that hyperglobalization and market fundamentalism actually endangers his vision for open societies. According to Soros, unregulated global capitalism threatens open societies. It also further enables tax evasion that starves public welfare and allows for risky lending practices. Ultimately, this can destabilize economies and worsen inequalities. In turn, this can breed resentment and add fuel to radical ideologies. Look, his intentions may stem from a desire to create a more equitable world, but ultimately what matters more is his actions. Now, controversies aside, let's talk about Soros' influence in the world of finance. His image in the financial world is nothing short of legendary, both for his astonishing success and for his investing principles that he developed. I mean, he did earn $1 billion in a single day. That's nothing to laugh about. But that's not the only reason he's been referred to as one of the best investors of all time. He undoubtedly is a financial heavyweight, having managed an annual return of over 30% for more than 3 decades. And what started as a $12 million seed investment turned into billions. He credits much of his success to his reflexivity theory, which he developed in the 1950s. This theory highlights how investors' perceptions and the real economy are closely linked, where beliefs alone can shape economic outcomes. Now, this idea is very different from traditional economics because it assumes that markets are stable and logical. Soros saw markets as naturally unstable, where prices can swing wildly away from their real value as investor confidence goes up or down. And this approach influenced world's markets and governments, and other investors have followed his lead. This wolfpack effect led many governments to fear his focus on their currencies, knowing that it could spark a financial crisis they might not be able to handle. But while his financial actions may invite valid criticism, on the flip side, he also has been a pioneer of impact investing. Impact investing is an investment strategy that aims to achieve both financial gains and social benefits. Basically, investors take on high-risk projects around the world, often in places with developing laws and infrastructure. This high-impact capital approach attracts investors who both want financial and social returns, extending investing into areas usually ignored by traditional financiers. Now look, George Soros' financial acumen and ideological pursuits have made him one of the most influential yet divisive figures of our time. His legendary investments shifted financial markets, while his open society foundations have driven many positive societal and political changes across the globe. To some, he's a forward-thinking philanthropist pushing for a more equitable world. But to others, he's a corrupt billionaire wielding outsized influence, challenging governments, and steering policies to further his own interests. Soros' belief that wealth should be a force for social change has positioned himself as a champion for liberal causes. However, his legacy has also raised serious questions about the limits of private influence on public policy. I mean, he betted against currencies to literally fund social movements. His interventions are sure to invite a heated debate on where philanthropy ends and power begins. His legacy is blurry, in my opinion. I'm honestly not sure whether to see him as a visionary reformer or as a symbol of the blurred lines between altruism and megalomania. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about him as well. Evil financial genius or kind philanthropist? Let me know in the comments below. And also, if you've made it this far, leave an upside down emoji smiley as well. It'll tell me how many of you made it so far in the video. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out this video where I did a deep dive on Rockefeller's legacy right here. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.